What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online. And to be perfectly honest, it's felt like I've been drowning in opportunity the last several days. I think yesterday's video I told you about I was making some money with some crypto, which is new to me. But over the last several months, I've shared a whole bunch of different platforms and places that I've been making money. Most of which has been on most of my time has been spent on Lofty. I still think, as I've mentioned several times, Ground Floor seems like it's going to be a great platform. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm, expecting to put a decent amount of money on there. The jury is still out on whether or not Mogul's going to work for me, but I have high hopes for the couple of properties I bought on there. But I've really been spending a lot of time looking at all the opportunities on Lofty. I know I've put out several videos about this, what I've been calling just, a quick flip. It's a token flip. It's not that we're flipping the property, but I bought this token right as the entity that holds it, that I own a piece of now, is selling it. This is now under contract, or we've at least agreed on terms. We got multiple offers, and so you can see the token price now has moved up to a ridiculous level. We're not even going to get this if we close at the price we agreed to. But relative to what I purchased them at, which is this number, should be doing pretty well. Um, but there's several of those types of properties that I've been looking at. But all of those, and like I mentioned the other day, all of those are an opportunity for me because somebody else lost money on them. They started off as $50 tokens. I bought them at 23, 24. Some of them 22. Some of the ones that I own, I bought in the teens. Just sometimes just a couple of tokens. Some of them, 35 tokens, averaging 18. Right, like somebody bought these 85, averaging 1867. Some people paid $50 for these tokens that my basis is 1867. And really, this, as I always mention, this isn't my true basis. They don't stick your fees in here, so I'm actually paying a little bit more on each of those, sometimes as much as a couple of bucks. Um, but regardless, it means that somebody had to lose money for me to get there. I put out a video probably a couple months now where I basically, I think it was in September, I went and did the math on, every token that they had outstanding and looked at how many were losers and how many were winners. And at the time, I want to say 50% of the tokens were had lost at least 20% of their value. And so, I mean, that's a huge number. It was pretty terrible. A lot of those, it was what Lofty calls their legacy properties, the ones that they did early on, that there wasn't really this co-owner like they use in the structure now. I'll put a link to that video below so you can see what I'm talking about. The numbers will have changed a little bit, but in general, most of those older ones are doing, significantly worse than $50 per token. There are a few exceptions, but really not many. But so more recently, the properties they put out, they have what's called a co-owner, and so the person that brings it to the platform isn't just selling off the whole property. The most they can sell is 90% of their equity. They have to hold the remaining 10%. And typically they're staying on as either the property manager or the liaison to the property manager. In either case, they have some responsibility, and they're usually also getting paid for that whole, some percent of revenue or something like that. This aligns the interests of the people who are bringing the property to the platform with the people who are investing a little bit more. At least that's the story, right? It still doesn't do it perfectly because, selling off 90% of your equity and just having to hold 10, you don't have a perfect alignment of interest. But it should be a little bit better than, if I was just coming and just selling my whole property on the platform and I never was responsible for it again. And so what I wanted to do today is actually just look at the properties that are just, oh, that's not the one I'm talking about here. This is different deal I was looking at, and I've got my little pop-up window blocking. You probably can't see that one, hopefully. Okay. So what I did is I took every property that I believe is a co-ownership structure. I might not have this perfect, but I think I went through and I tried to figure it out, and I think I matched up right. One of the things that I did is looked at the list of Discord because there's a separate Discord channel for every single co-owner property, or at least they're supposed to be. So I started with that list, and then I went through and tried to match it up. At the moment, this is in November 30th, 2024. Right now, there appears to be 45 of these properties. Yeah, it's a few less than how many channels there were. I deleted some of the channels if I couldn't find an actual listing for the property. I think there's some that the channel gets put up before the property's live. And then there's one that the channel is put up. Somebody's tokenized their property, but it's not for sale yet. So I don't know what's going on there. I looked at the average price of all these tokens, right? They range everywhere from over $70 to down to $42. The average price though is $52. So that was pretty good, right? Right away, we can see the average deal that's in this co-ownership model is a winner, right? Because they all started at $50. And so that was glad to see. Then I counted up the number of winners and the number of losers. 27 are above $50, and that could just be $50.01. It didn't, and actually it's $50.15 is the one, but I'm just using the formula to count. So it's just anything over $50. So 27% are winners. It's a pretty good percent. Or 27 of the 45 are winners. That's not the percentage. Let's do the percentages. We should have done that. Right. Divided by 45. It looks like around 60%. Let's turn that into a percent. Add a little bit. Oh yeah, okay, cool. And then we'll do the same thing here. This divided by, because we're going to look at the losers next, right? How many of them are losers? Same thing, right? Let's add a couple of those, and then let's do this too. Let's just equals this. Divided by this. Yeah, I should have done all this math ahead of time. I don't know why I didn't really think of it in percentages when I was just thinking about it by myself. But once I started talking about it out loud, it made me want to know that, right? And so, okay, about 60 or exactly 60% are above the $50 threshold. 24.44% are below. You'll notice that doesn't add up to 100, and that's because there's the remaining number are just still at exactly 50. I think some of those it's probably that they're not really, they're just still selling out, or they're just relatively new, and so there's not anybody selling them. And I looked at ones that lost more than 10% of their value, or won more than 10% of their value already, not won but gained. And so 20% of them that are using this model have already gained more than 10% of their value, meaning the token's $55 or above, or and then so lost more than 10%, only two properties, right? And so, oh, what's happening there? I'm gonna drag that back up. I don't know how I did that. There we go. So this looks a lot better than the numbers that we looked at before when we were looking at all the tokens together. One of the things though that makes me realize is that all those the numbers, the overall numbers are being pulled up by all these co-owner ones. So the ones that were not using this model are even worse than what those numbers implied, and I think that's been pretty obvious. I also though think that that's where I'm finding a lot of the opportunities, because getting into some of those and then being an active participant and coming up with a strategy and making proposals is the way that I think I'm going to make some money on those other ones. But it is that initial batch did shockingly bad. But then the other thing too is because this is their newer model, it's certainly possible that at the moment these are mostly just doing well because it's early on, right? And so people bought them, they're relatively happy, not a lot has gone wrong yet. But over time, some of them will start to slip through the cracks a little more. This one is one that we see as a winner right now, but there was a short period of time where you could pick them up, I want to say in the 30s. Um, but then it's back to 50. So there was some of that, and then a couple of the others that I've seen. I think my average price on this one is $42, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. It might be 44. Yeah, $44. So even though right now it's doing all right, it has had a problem at different points in the past. Andover's done well, but there's yeah, this one is already excuse me, already showing as one of the losers. And so I guess altogether what I wanted to just point out is I think that this is a better model. But there are still a significant number of losers, right? Like so um one of the things to keep in mind when you're buying these, right? You're getting your yield, you're getting whatever your yield is, and then also you should see the price of the token, hopefully at least remain stable, but also go up over time, right? If your property value is increasing, the value of that token should go up. Um, Now, one of the reasons that sometimes they don't is over time they're getting diluted if there's debt being paid down. So it's possible that your property values could go up, but your token value is not going up because you're getting diluted too fast. And that happens when they do the debt pay down. Although that really shouldn't happen. It shouldn't affect it should make your token value go down too much. But because that dilution lowers your yield, it may. And so it is, it's one of the things that it's really tough to know because there's not long-term data on how the model works where they have the diluting, the dilutive structure where the co-owner pays off the debt. There's a lot of people that have put some models together of how that should work. But I think it just depends on how people price those tokens in the future, because their yields start to go down. So I don't know. I think this is promising. Like it definitely looks better than when I look at all the numbers together. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I think there are a ton of opportunities. I've found several. I only own a couple of these co-owner properties. There's, one of the things is you have to really pay attention to who that co-owner is, because there are definitely some that aren't doing a great job with their properties. And some of them, it's not even really obvious yet. But I think that maybe because I have a little bit more insight into real estate than the average user on here, there's a few that I'm staying away from that a lot of people seem to really like. And I think that only time will tell if that's a good decision or not. Um, but overall, I think it's good news, but I think it just really goes to show that, like, even if you have even when you're buying the newer ones with a co-owner model, um, having 24% of these lose money, even if it's just a little bit, is not ideal, right? Like normally I'm hoping to get my cash flow and to get some appreciation. And here, almost all of the tokens have a very high yield. But if the trade-off is that you're getting, capital depreciation, basically the value of your actual investment is going down. It's a trade-off that you really have to think about and work into the model. And it kind of goes along with what I was talking about the other day, where you just don't want to look at just see which one's giving you the highest yield and just necessarily buy that, because it's very possible that you're going to have that high yield initially, but your token's going to end up going down in value significantly over your hold period. I'd be more worried about that with some of the ones that are, you know, flying high above their, above the value of the underlying asset for sure. But it also shows that, like, some of these only came out a couple months ago. Like, if I had bought into this, if I had gotten some of those $50 tokens, I would definitely have sold out by now and had a nice little profit in a short period of time. And so that's, it presents an opportunity. And that's the thing, like anytime there are risks, there's also some opportunity for reward. Now, whether, the thing that you want to do is, um, be aware of your risks, mitigate them as much as you can, and hopefully, position yourself to take advantage of the reward as much as possible. Obviously, there are a bunch of people that were left holding the bag with, all these ones that just really tanked in value over, that were the initial ones. Like I said, I think this new model's working a little bit better, but it's certainly not foolproof, right? I mean, when you have already, it's we're not even like years down the road and already you have a couple of big losers. That's a little problematic, right? Like, you want to really make sure you don't end up with these. And actually, I think I do own, yeah, I own 5 shares of one of them. And I don't know if you remember watching this video or if you did watch this video, but this is one where when I bought these tokens, I even mentioned that I thought the price was a little bit high, and that I was only going to buy a couple tokens, and then when the price came down, I'd buy more. I was thinking it would get to 45. I think it actually got even lower at one point, but I missed them. But it's definitely one where, I kind of expected it just because of the setup that it has. Another one that is down, this is a small loser, right? Actually, barely, it barely counts. It's a tiny bit below. And then some that are winners, I got in at a lower basis than what they currently are. And I showed you that one. I think that's the biggest discount. But then this one was a little bit too, and I think some of these even sold for less at one point in time. So, in any case, the point is, I do think that this co-ownership model fixed a lot of what's wrong with the platform as far as the properties. I think the average result's probably going to be better. Although only time will tell, right? I mean, it's tough to know, when a lot of those co-owners, because most of them right now, even though they're allowed to sell off 90% of the equity, most of them aren't selling that much initially. And so, a lot of them own 50% or more of the equity still. And so if that's the case, uh, of course they're going to perform better, right? And so as time goes on and they sell off more, they own a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. Um, that might change. Although on the flip side, a lot of them, as they pay down debt, are getting more ownership, not less, and so that might actually mean that the ones that are in that boat, um, it should be they should have the proper incentive to keep doing a good job. That's all I wanted to share with you today. Just always, whenever I'm digging into numbers and I find something I think is a little bit interesting, I'm going to try to share it. Um, as I mentioned, lots of opportunities out there, lots of opportunities to lose money too. You have to do your own due diligence, make sure you're really understanding what's going on. Try to learn from other people's mistakes, not your own. Just like I always say, until next time, I will keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.